Live Fit Podcast, episode 66, with another from the Wednesdays with Will series, Inflammation.
Chronic inflammation is associated with essentially all major deadly diseases. Heart disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, arthritis, all major diseases all have inflammation implicated as being at the base of their cause. The newest known anti-inflammatory are fish oil fractions. In other words, this is really cutting edge. This is the latest, greatest nutritional research as it relates to inflammation.
You're listening to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson. Here, we'll talk about all things related to good health, fitness, food, fat loss, and the mind-body connection.
Ah, yes. It is time once again for the Live Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Johnson. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is episode 66, and my fifth in my Wednesdays with Will series. And today, Dr. Harden is going to talk about inflammation, what it means to you, and what you can do about it. But I just wanted to point something out. As I'm sitting here putting this episode together, I realized that it was 2 years ago today that I was putting my first episode together. Today is the day after Thanksgiving. 2 years ago, I started my experiment, we'll say, in podcasting. I had no idea how many I would do. I just wanted to put a few out and see if I liked it, see if you liked it. If any of you listening now have heard any of those first 3, 5, 6, 10 episodes, I apologize, they're pretty rough, but this is a learning experience for me as well as you. I'm hoping you've learned some things from the material I've brought to you. I know I've learned something about interviewing and most importantly about putting a podcast together and some of the technical details, but I've really loved it. I have a background in radio and a background in post-production sound, so this sort of thing was not entirely brand new, but it still has its own little difficulties and quirks, but I've really enjoyed it. So if you've enjoyed it, please do me a favor and share and subscribe. I also wanted to point out that if you do want to help support the show, and I would certainly appreciate it, you can be a patron by clicking on the livefitpodcast.com. I have a link over on the right-hand side on the sidebar. It's a big orange rectangle. It says Be a Patron. You could also go to patreon.com/livefitpodcast. That's patreon.com/livefitpodcast. And I'm not asking for anything in particular. If you've got some spare change, maybe $1 an episode. What's this show worth to you? I'm not going to beg for money. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to help out the show, keep me commercial free. So that's enough of that. I'm going to go right into this episode with Dr. Will Harden, and he's going to tell you all about inflammation.
Inflammation. What a huge topic. Inflammation is an absolutely necessary part of our physiology. If you work out too hard, if you do a bike race, you train too hard, and especially if you hurt yourself, sprain an ankle, strain a wrist, hurt your knee or back, one of the first things that happens is inflammation occurs. And what that means is multiple cells go into an area of tissue damage. For example, neutrophils and macrophages cause a response that basically they release histamines, and that causes vasodilation and lots of fluids to come into the area, and that splints the area. It makes it so that it's sore and it doesn't move too much. And that's actually very therapeutic, right? That's the first stage of healing, the acute inflammatory stage. But so many people develop chronic inflammation, meaning at really a chemical level, they're retaining fluids and they have inflammatory processes happening throughout the body. But there is not even a question that chronic inflammation is associated with essentially all major deadly diseases. Heart disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, arthritis, all major diseases all have inflammation implicated as being at the base of their cause. Therefore, avoiding chronic inflammation is extremely wise. Relative to natural remedies to control inflammation, there's ample evidence that many things help accomplish this. First, and something that's been around for 50 years, is something called proteolytic enzymes. If you take certain enzymes on an empty stomach, they essentially chew up inflammatory cells and fluids and reduce inflammation. You've probably heard of one called bromelain. That's an example of a proteolytic enzyme, which, when taken on an empty stomach only, is absorbed whole, gets into the bloodstream, and does reduce inflammation. So if I see someone, let's say, with extreme neck pain, back pain, pain between the shoulder blades as a result of an injury, let's say a motor vehicle accident, if we put them on bromelain, a fairly high dose, like 3 capsules 3 times a day, only on an empty stomach, which means an hour before lunch, an hour before dinner, and at bedtime. Usually within 24 hours, they'll say, I swear that stuff really helps. But the compliance with a proteolytic enzyme is fairly low because many people have difficulty either remembering to take it when they have an empty stomach, or they never have an empty stomach. Second, the newest thing in the natural remedies arena as it relates to research is turmeric. Turmeric contains a compound called curcumin, and we know that curcumin has strong anti-inflammatory compounds within it, or principles. That is to say, taking curcumin or a turmeric extract, the beauty is it doesn't require an empty stomach. You take 1 capsule in the morning, 1 in the evening. Most people within 5 days, the research shows 80% of people within 5 days feel the effect as reduced inflammation. And I dispense probably on a daily basis turmeric to people with chronic inflammation because it's so incredibly rampant. So many people have chronic inflammation in the form of chronic pain. And of course, as a chiropractor, a lot of people see me for pain, that I consequently carry that and dispense it very regularly with great benefit. Other possible considerations. The newest known anti-inflammatory are fish oil fractions. Fish oil contains omega-3 fatty acids. There are 2 omega-3 fatty acids. EPA, which is eicosapentaenoic acid, or DHA, which is docosahexaenoic acid. Well, and we know that those have anti-inflammatory potential. However, the bioavailability, the ability of EPA and DHA to be absorbed and to interfere with the inflammatory process is fairly limited. That is to say, you'd have to take 6 or 8 grams a day to notice distinct anti-inflammatory principles, effects. Out of Harvard University, there is very recent research resulting in the manufacturing of fractions of EPA and DHA. That is to say, small extracts, if you will, from EPA and DHA. One is known as 17-hydroxydocosahexaenoic acid, and the other is 18-hydroxyeicosapentaenoic acid. These 2 fractions are now proven to interfere at the chemical level with the inflammatory process in such a way that the researcher who did this work is expected to win a Nobel Prize for it. In other words, this is really cutting edge. This is the latest, greatest nutritional research as it relates to inflammation. And based on that, I just started carrying this. It's made by a company called Metagenics, and it's called SPM Active Omegagenics. It calls for a very small dose. It's 1 small capsule about the size of a oil-based vitamin D gel cap, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. It's fairly expensive, but extremely compelling in its likelihood to change the way we see inflammation. So what is the typical approach to treating inflammation? Well, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like Advil, Naproxen, which is also Aleve. And then, of course, there's multiple prescription variations on that. And then there's Celebrex, which is a COX-2 inhibitor. But we know that all NSAIDs have the same potential destructive effect on the GI system, and that is erosion and possible hemorrhaging of the GI lining. In fact, on average in the U.S., 16,500 people die as a result of GI bleeding, as a result of taking nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories, and the majority of those deaths are from Advil, which we naturally think is really safe because you can get it at every gas station, corner store, grocery store, and Gulf Pro shop in the U.S. So we assume it's safe. It is not meant to be taken for more than 1 to 2 weeks at a time. And unfortunately, erosion of the GI lining and possible hemorrhaging may not necessarily be really symptomatic. It may just simply cause fatigue, which gets worse and worse until a medical emergency arises, at which time it may be discovered there's internal bleeding. So not to be taken casually to deal with neck pain and back pain and an old knee injury and that old multiple sprained ankle just because you can get it over the counter everywhere. I think I'll stop there for the sake of not rambling on, but inflammation is a big topic that could be discussed for hours.
Hey guys, you like what you hear? If so, you can help support the show by giving a little extra cash. Whatever you have, whatever you think it's worth, whatever this show is worth to you. Is it worth $1 an episode? $4, $5 an episode? Whatever you have, whatever you think it's worth, you can support this show. I know a lot of you want to keep it going, keep it commercial free, and going to patreon.com/livefitpodcast can do that. Patreon is patreon.com. Also, if you're on the show notes page at livefitpodcast.com, there is a link on the right-hand side. It says, be a patron. Thank you very much. Please remember to share and subscribe this episode, and I look forward to talking to you again next time. Take care.